Good morning, guys. We're going to go ahead and continue with Activity 8, Thermal Energy Storage. Yesterday, you guys read through the introduction and you even completed Procedure 1 on your own. So if we take a look at Procedure 2, Procedure 2 wants us to work with your group to design an investigation to determine the factors that influence how much thermal energy an object can hold or release. When designing your experiment, think about the following questions. So what we're doing is kind of using these questions as a bit of a guide. So what is the purpose of our experiment? The purpose is for us to determine what factors can influence how much thermal energy an object can hold or release. Okay, so the materials we're going to use for that would be the two steel cylinders and the rubber stopper. We need to make sure we develop hypothesis, have variables that we will test, what variables are we going to control or keep the same, and what data are we going to record. So again, we're going to work together here to develop steps or procedures and how to complete this investigation. So I'm going to go this real quick. Now we have this student sheet here that you guys should have uploaded. Make sure you guys do have this uploaded in your Activity 8 note because we can use this data table as kind of a guide to help us develop our procedures. So if we look at this data table real quick, this is kind of going to clue us in on the first step that we should complete. So we know what the description of the objects are. So we have the short steel cylinder, long steel cylinder, and rubber stopper. We can go ahead and label those. So right here in this first box, we'll go ahead and put short steel cylinder. Next one we can put long steel cylinder. And then last one would be rubber stopper. So that's the first thing we'll do. Now we are going to look to see what our first procedure should be. So looks like we have mass and in grams, so we need to find the mass of each object, which means we need to find, the measurement or the weight in grams. So I think that should be our first procedure. So I'll minimize this, go to my document. You guys would just do this in Notability as usual. So we'll label it energy storage. Step 1, find the mass of each of the objects, steel cylinders and rubber stopper, and record the type of object and its mass in the table on your student sheet. So that would be our first step. So that's step 1. So what do we need to do after that? So let's take a look at the student sheet real quick. So we need to, we have the description, we would have the mass, so temperature of hot water. So we need to then select one of these objects and follow teacher's directions for how to heat it. So we kind of got to heat one of the objects by placing it in the hot water, and we're probably going to want to leave it in there for a certain amount of time in order for it to absorb as much as that heat as possible from the water. So I would say 5 minutes would probably be a good point for us to leave it in there. So let's go ahead and move on to procedure 2. We would say select one of the objects and follow teacher's instructions for how to heat it by placing it in the hot water, and leave the object in the hot water for at least 5 minutes. Okay, so moving on to step 3. So let's take a look at the materials that we are using besides the steel cylinders and the rubber stopper. So we will also have foam cups, glass thermometer, graduated cylinder. Let's take a look at the student sheet. Temperature of hot water, temperature of cold water. So we have temperature of the hot water, we're heating the hot water. So now we need to do something with the cold water. Okay, so third step, how about while the object is heating, we will use the graduated cylinder to fill the foam cup with cold water. Okay. So now we're going to move on to our fourth step. We will use the thermometer to get the temperature of the cold water. So we will place a thermometer in the cup of cold water and monitor the temperature of the cold water. How about record instead of monitor? Record the temperature of the cold water in your data table. So then the temperature of the hot water. I will tell you the temperature of the hot water. Considering I'm gonna be conducting this lab for you guys, I'll also have to tell you guys the temperature of the cold water, but we're kind of writing from a different perspective here. So your teacher will tell you the temperature of the hot water. Record this in your data table. Then we will, I think about that time, 5 minutes will be up. So then we could transfer that first object that we are heating in the hot water to the cold water. So we will say quickly, because we don't want to lose any of that thermal energy, transfer the hot object into the cold water. We need to make sure that we are careful to not hit the thermometer with the object. Moving on to step 7, we're almost finished here. I think we only need a few more steps, maybe 10, 11, should be good. So then we need to kind of make sure that that thermal energy is dispersed evenly throughout the cold water. So we kind of need to stir that water up gently. Gently stir or swirl the cold water in the foam cup while kind of observing the temperature. We will keep, observing or keep checking the temperature for several minutes. When the temperature has stopped rising, record the final temp in your data table. So, moving on to step 9. So now if we take a look at our student sheet real quick, we would already have the mass recorded, we would have the temperature of the hot water recorded, temperature of the cold water recorded, and now we have recorded the final temperature with that step 8 finishing up. So now we need to kind of figure out what the temperature change was. So step 9, we would say calculate how much the temperature of the cold water increased. Record this number in your data table. Step 10, we're finished with the first object, so we would choose another object, choose a different object, and we would just repeat steps 2 through 9. And then step 11, if time allows, maybe we could increase the temperature or use a different temperature. Repeat the experiment using hot water at a different temperature. There you have it. There's our 11 steps for our Activity 8 thermal energy storage. Make sure you guys have tried to develop steps on your own first before following along with the video. And if you do have your steps developed and you want to kind of add or revise with some of the steps that I have, feel free to do so. We will conduct this experiment tomorrow as a class. Obviously, I will conduct it for you. You guys will be observing. So there you have it. There's your procedures and steps for Activity 8 thermal energy storage. One last thing. Make sure that you guys do have the student sheet uploaded to your Activity 8 note. All right, see you guys. Have a good day.